Hello and welcome to Claris Engage 2020. This session is High Performance Web Apps. It's an introduction to Claris FileMaker WebDirect. This is the first of several sessions and it's the general overview of WebDirect. My name is Jonn Howell. I am the president of DataExperience Inc. I'm lucky enough to live in Northern California in the foothills of the Sierra Nevada mountains, just outside Sacramento. I'm a nature lover and an animal lover. I love to get up every Saturday morning at the crack of dawn and head up into the mountains to go for a nice long hike. Or a nice long mountain bike ride with my e-bike. I'm the president of DataExperience for 18 years now. I've been a FileMaker developer professionally for 28 years. And I've been working intensely with FileMaker WebDirect for the last 7 years, since the product came out in FileMaker 13. I'm a certified FileMaker developer 9 times from version 7 up to 18. So about this session, we're going to have a series of short videos, and you're also going to see a live demo of a system I'm building for a public speaking organization that I'm quite involved with. So what is FileMaker WebDirect, and why is it important to you? What can it bring to the table to make your experience of FileMaker even richer? Well, right off the Claris website, the definition of FileMaker WebDirect is this: innovative web technology that instantly runs FileMaker apps directly in a browser. Simply put, if you're not a web developer and you don't have a lot of fancy programming skills, you can take your wonderful FileMaker app with your great interface and all your calculations and security and fields and all that wonderful work you've done to deploy and instantly make it available to people in a web browser who don't even have a FileMaker client installed. All you have to do is be running WebDirect on a current version on a server. WebDirect is scalable. It allows you to take your existing FileMaker app that can run up to 2,000 users when it's hosted on a FileMaker server and add another 500 users in WebDirect in a browser. So you can extend how many users you can have, and you can supply it to people that maybe are on a device that can't have FileMaker installed. Maybe it's an Android product or a Chromebook, or maybe they're on the road and they don't have time to install FileMaker. They can run it right in a browser. I'm like, how cool is that? You're going to get the bulk of FileMaker features running in a browser instantly. FileMaker WebDirect has nearly full FileMaker feature support. There's only a few things that you have to consider yourself with, certain types of imports and exports and certain types of printing. But all of the features, like 95% of the features in FileMaker, work natively in WebDirect in a browser. Things like portals. You can make graceful, beautiful portals. Tab controls. Quick find and web viewers. A web viewer in WebDirect looking at some other HTML code or JavaScript code right inside of FileMaker WebDirect. How cool is that? Believe it or not, this is an example, a screenshot of an animated chart written in JavaScript with the code embedded in FileMaker and rendering in FileMaker WebDirect in a browser. Way cool. FileMaker WebDirect supports automated processes. You know, like things that you would do that are procedural, like a script or a script trigger, as you could tell here from this little orange badge that indicates I have a portal that triggers a procedure in a script when it's entered. Calculations and conditional formatting that you would do in FileMaker render really well in WebDirect as well. And also hide objects. So when you want to use calculations to determine, like you see in the little black eye-shaped badge, you want things to be invisible under different conditions or users or whatever it might be, that works just as well in WebDirect as it does in FileMaker. FileMaker WebDirect also supports live updates. That means if you've got a user in WebDirect and another user in FileMaker and maybe another user in WebDirect, and you make changes on any one of those user installations on any platform, the data is nearly instantly refreshed not only in your browser, but on the FileMaker client as well. It's sent to the server, long polling returns it. So if I'm in a browser and you're in a browser and I change data and you're looking at the same record, you're going to see the response to my changes almost instantly. That's incredible. You don't even have to refresh the browser. It happens automatically with FileMaker's technology. You also have PDF support. So printing from a browser is quite possible. You know, invoices, reports, we all have a lot of reports, or labels or badges or whatever. You can print, you get a card window that comes up, asks you what do you want to do to print as a PDF, and then to blow that up a little bit, here's a picture of that dialog that comes up. So you can print a beautiful PDF right out of a browser, rendering your wonderful code in FileMaker. So FileMaker WebDirect runs in a web browser using all the current technologies, specifically HTML5, CSS3, and JavaScript, and you don't have to know any of those technologies. It does it all for you. So again, if you have limited web development skills, understand that FileMaker's handling all of that for you to give you this state-of-the-art FileMaker experience in a web browser. It works on a variety of different browsers and platforms, desktops, laptops, mobile devices. It works in Safari. FileMaker WebDirect works in Google Chrome, and it renders also very nicely in Internet Explorer and Microsoft Edge. So you have your choice of these 4 different browsers to work with, depending on what platform you're on. Obviously, desktop browsers and mobile browsers are a little bit different, but it works across all of these. So, FileMaker WebDirect instantly gives you the vast majority of FileMaker Pro features that you would have in FileMaker Pro or FileMaker Pro Advanced, being hosted on a server. It saves you all of that web development effort. And you know, the thing is, it's really easy to learn and deploy. There's a few things you want to look for about coding it a special way, lining things up. I'll go over that a little bit in a live demo and in a future session. So there's a few things to look out for, because every platform has its peculiarities, but these are really, really few and minimal. Pretty much you could just throw a FileMaker system on the server, open it for WebDirect access, and it'll work really well. But if you plan a little bit, it'll work even better. So this is a great tool if you have limited web development skills. Someone like me, I use it a lot because I'm not a highly skilled web developer, but I can put out some beautiful WebDirect systems written in FileMaker. You get robust functionality. You can use drag and drop. It'll use your themes and your styles. Let's talk about performance. You might be wondering, well, I wonder if it's slow. You know, I went to Germany last year and I spoke at a small conference in Berlin. There's a FileMaker group, and I have a system for credit card processing online on an Amazon AWS server in Northern California. And I thought, let me open that FileMaker system in FileMaker Pro on my MacBook Pro overseas. And you know, it was a little slow because it had to travel, whether it's under the ocean or in the sky. It had to get to Europe from California. And FileMaker rendered it a little bit slow, especially when I was doing a list view with some calculations. Then I showed everybody, there was 100 people there. I showed everybody, hey, check this out in FileMaker WebDirect. And it was instant. It was amazing how fast it performed. The same list view overseas on the same server, just instant deployment and presentation in WebDirect. It was the most awesome experience, and everybody was really stoked. And at that moment, I became so convinced this is the most wonderful tool that I've ever experienced. So, on a wide area network, it's faster than FileMaker Pro. And actions that could be performed by what people refer to as PSOS, or perform script on server, can take away the burden from the browser. So while you're off doing other things on a different screen, the server can be running scripts for you. And I'll talk about that a little bit more in detail. So FileMaker runs apps, whether it's on a computer, a tablet, or a mobile phone, or a netbook type of device. And it's available to be hosted on FileMaker Cloud and FileMaker Server. So it could be on-prem, it could be on AWS, and it could be hosted by FileMaker Server. That's the bottom line, is you've got to host your FileMaker system on a server somewhere that can get access to the network or the internet so you can access FileMaker WebDirect. PSOS, or Perform Script on Server, is going to become your very dear friend. That's this script step that you deploy, a lot like Perform Script, but it's Perform Script on Server, where you pass the parameters to a script that's being run by the server, or you could use script scheduling. That way, certain things that can't happen in a browser, not due to the limitations of WebDirect, but due to the limitations of a browser, we make up for that by pushing it to the server, and the server can run certain procedures for you, freeing you up from the limitations or the time delays that may happen in a browser. Not only that, you can use server-side plugins. In my company, we use a lot of Base Elements and 360works Plastic. 360works Plastic is a credit card processing plugin that takes a lot of the burden out of you for having to decipher all the codes that go back and forth to different credit card gateways. And these two plugins have server-side versions that allow you to take advantage of the plugin even though you're working in a browser, because you can't really install FileMaker plugins on a browser, right? And there's a variety of other plugins. There's lots of them available that are server-side that will empower you in WebDirect. I'm just listing two here that I use a lot. So I have written a good number of projects in FileMaker WebDirect. I built an issue management and notification system for manufacturing to let management and managers on factory floors know when there's issues with the product and what to do with it. I've written CRMs and document management where we hold all the different documents available in externally stored container fields in FileMaker and use the entire system in WebDirect, maybe with a few people running FileMaker Pro for administration, but a full CRM with document management, all kinds of PDFs and images and variety of different documents, Excel documents and Word documents, all being managed in FileMaker through WebDirect in a browser. I've also worked with manufacturing in biotechnology. Now, a CMO is a contract manufacturing organization. A lot of large medical companies and biotechnology companies don't make their own products in-house. They make them outside through contracted organizations. And I've written a lot of systems where they can run different relationships with their CMOs through WebDirect and not have to have FileMaker installed. I've also worked with credit card processing, PCI compliant credit card processing, which is an organization of credit card processing companies that want to establish standards for the security of credit card holders. All their personal information is held very securely, and we can do that through WebDirect and good coding. I'm a member of a public speaking organization that's pretty well known, and I'm writing a system. It's not even complete, but I'm going to show you where I'm at with it. I'm writing it for WebDirect so everybody in the organization can use it from their iPhones or their computers at home and update information about who's speaking next and who's going to be evaluated, who our new guests are and our members, and who the new officers are. I can do all this in WebDirect, and look how clean that is. It's so easy to make beautiful FileMaker render in a web browser. I want to close this session with a quote from a famous philosopher, J. Krishnamurti, who says, if we can really understand the problem, the answer will come out of it, because the answer is not separate from the problem. So in this case, the problem might be, how do I extend my FileMaker to people who aren't able to get the app or are on a phone or a tablet? And here's the answer. It's FileMaker WebDirect. It's not separate from FileMaker. It's not separate from the problem, but the solution is just fantastic. I encourage you to explore this product and watch the other videos that I'm going to put out. Thank you very much. Welcome to Claris Engage 2020. This session is High Performance Web Apps, an introduction to Claris FileMaker WebDirect. This chapter is on design considerations. My name's Jonn Howell. I'm the president of DataExperience. Let's talk about design considerations for WebDirect. While WebDirect is a very straightforward tool, and any straightforward, well-designed FileMaker solution will deploy to it quickly, there are certain design considerations you want to make in order to have a really nice WebDirect experience with quick and good performance. So I always start off with careful planning about what I'm going to build. And I'll have an entity relationship diagram and a map and my fields, and I'll know what I'm doing. But before I actually build anything in FileMaker, I'll put together a color palette. Here's one that we recently used for a credit card processing company. We had about 17 colors when we're done, but they were all designed using Adobe's Kuler website, KULER.com, and we found 3 different themes that we blended together for a nice experience. So after we build a color palette, we'll create a theme, which I usually pick from the minimalist theme, and then customize it from there. Once I have a theme going, you'll want to style your different objects. And the best way to do that is to create a back-end layout that no one ever sees but the developer, where you can see here we've broken up different objects, the default values for different fields and buttons, custom colors applied to different types of buttons and fields, transparent fields, field labels, left, center, right, justified fields, calendars, pop-ups, drop-downs, and all the different types of object configurations you might have, so you can assign each one to a style. That'll allow FileMaker to build a library that will render each screen a lot quicker and consistently, and also give you the opportunity to change something if you wanted to change from one color to another or one font to another and change it and save it in one place. You'll be able to render it throughout your system. Now you would do this with any FileMaker system, but especially when you're using WebDirect, you want to use simple, straightforward colors that are web safe. You want to use fonts that are always going to render well in browsers. So to be honest, I design everything in Arial because it works cross-platform. Every browser knows it. It's clean, it's simple, and straightforward. Now you might want to be a little more exotic than my simple approach towards Arial, but that works for everything. I compensate with the simple font choice by using other complicated and more elegant graphics and shapes and buttons to make it a rich interface, but always straightforward and consistent with my use of font. Another important thing in planning is your architecture. Now, that may include how many files you use, if it's one or many, or if you're using what's known as a session model or a separation model or a distribution model, but it's how you structure your files and then how you structure the work within a file. I like to start with my field naming conventions that are always consistent, and I use a 4-letter abbreviation followed by the name of the table under the Table Name tab, so I have my built-in legend right there. My point being, whatever you do, be consistent, be methodical, have conventions that are going to work. When it comes to the relational graph management, I happen to be a fan of Anchor Buoy. You may not, but the concept is to make it clean and simple, use colors to your advantage, make it easy to refer to without having to memorize a lot of complex relationships, so your mind is clean and freed up to think creatively with WebDirect. Lastly, I always consider navigation at first when I start, and I like to use this very simple horizontal tab-based navigation structure. The tabs that you see with dashboard, meetings, members, guests, left to right, and so on, are actually one assembly of a button bar. So you get a consistent look and feel. You can assign the different highlights to the different highlighted ones. And I've just found, even though there's a variety of different navigational models in the world, most of my users are familiar with and keep coming back to simple tab navigation. So here you see a top navigation button bar with the dark green, and then another tab panel a little lower down that mimics the same thing with horizontal tabs, officers, meeting roles, speeches, evaluators, and so on. So one mimics the other, and I use a difference in color gradient, a little bit opposite. The top is dark green with white text, and the bottom one is basically white or light gray with green text. So it's complementary, but it's simple, it's straightforward, it's left to right, the way most people think. I'm just suggesting that you consider planning ahead of time to make this easy. Now, when we talk to using web viewers in WebDirect, certain considerations you should make. Web viewers work well in WebDirect, but you want to make sure that your protocols, whether it's HTTP or HTTPS, are consistent. So if the server you're trying to reach is HTTP and it's not secured, and the server you've got is HTTP, it will work, but don't cross the protocols. If you have a FileMaker server that's HTTPS because you've got a SSL certificate installed, and your website or code you're trying to reach in your web viewer is also HTTPS, it will render. But if you're trying to go from HTTP to HTTPS, or the other way around, HTTPS to HTTP, you might find that the web viewer won't render. So don't mix your protocols. Another thing we found that because web viewers and charting works in iframes or xframes, you might want to do a simple substitution. If you're using some fancy JavaScript code in a web viewer, I would substitute a pound sign in a color for a % sign, and it works really well. Simple things to keep in mind. Now this is an example, a static screenshot of an animated chart appearing in a web viewer within WebDirect. It works well so long as we honor the two slides I mentioned before. You don't cross your protocols, and then you make sure that the code is compliant with web viewer technology, and you can get some beautiful experiences with web viewers within WebDirect. So here's an example of a layout mode where we see a number of graphics, images, and objects all over the screen, and in the bottom right we have a web viewer that's used for the charting. So just kind of giving you a sense that a WebDirect solution can easily render a web viewer if you plan it properly. Welcome to Claris Engage 2020. This session is High Performance Web Apps, an introduction to Claris FileMaker WebDirect. This chapter is on design considerations. My name is Jonn Howell. I'm the president of DataExperience. Screen flash is a big thing in WebDirect to consider. There's a few different ways that it will bite you, or that you can prevent it with a simple planning. First of all, when you log in, the first thing you should do is pull up the File Options dialog box and hide all toolbars. Easy thing to do. That prevents screen flash on open when the screen adjusts itself to the different positions. So I lock everything up so that there's no toolbars at all, and I tend to replace the different toolbar items in WebDirect with objects and buttons that are scripted. That's your choice. You can open it back up later on with scripting, but if you hide it to start with, you will eliminate on session start screen flash. There is an issue, known issue, with list views in WebDirect when you're looking at a list view and somebody's editing in a detail view. Their edits, when they're submitted or they're committed, will cause screen flash to somebody looking at a list view. So if you have multiple users editing details in a detail view and somebody else looking at a list view, the person with the list view is going to see the screen flash for every time someone commits a record. Well, that's a bit of a pain. So what I've done is built a shadow table. What you're looking here is a list view of guests at an event, but it's not actually the guest table. It's a shadow guest table. So it's a one-to-one thing where you have a separate table representing each person, and when the changes are edited, let's say to Tinkerbell, when the first record there, when her record is changed, in the detail view, it doesn't affect the list view because I have a script schedule or a perform script on server step set to refresh that record in a timely way at a certain periodicity that I specify ahead of time. That way the user in the list view doesn't get the screen flash every time someone's editing in the detail view. Especially important when we're doing something like an auction event where there's hundreds of people involved using the system and the person in the list view doesn't want to see screen flash. So you would build a shadow table in a one-to-one relationship, minimize the fields you use in the shadow table because all you have to see is the number of columns across, which might be 6 or 8 different columns across the list view. And don't add record data, don't assign cascading deletes. Have everything handled in a script to update, whether it's to add, update, or delete records in the shadow table. Update minimal field data. Use a script schedule if you can is the best way to let the script say every 2 or 3 minutes we're going to refresh the list view. That will handle all your adds, deletes, and edits. And note that when you're navigating between list and detail view, you're actually navigating between different tables. So when you go from the detail view to the list view, you're going to the shadow table. And when you go to the list view to the detail view, you're going back to the real record. So a little something to plan. You can email me if you want a little information about this. I'm glad to help out. I'm just trying to give an overall perspective of things to look for screen flash. So far we've just looked at on open session start with locking up the tools, the toolbars, and here with list view screen flash. Now that we have card windows in FileMaker 19, that's a wonderful asset. So now here's a picture of my public speaking organization. When I want to edit or add a member, I've got a nice card window pop up that allows me to stay in one context. So people talk about context-free scripting. I say that rarely happens, but you could have single context scripting. I'm building this system so that everything you do can be, as far as editing, adding, and deleting records for any aspect of the system, can all be done from the single context of a meeting. The only reason I have other tabs there for members and guests and speeches is so you can see a list of members, or a list of the guests who have attended, or a list of the speeches that have been made. But actual actions that need to be taken against any item, any entity, in any attribute of any entity in any table can all happen right there from the meetings context and never have to navigate anywhere. Auto-sizing, also known as object anchoring. FileMaker calls it auto-sizing, but my nickname for it is object anchoring, is what you see here in the inspection palette on the first tab with the ruler on it. Down at the bottom, auto-sizing is how you're going to anchor your objects to the top, the left, the bottom, or the right. I say don't ever anchor anything in WebDirect except to the top and the left, because if you stretch the window to the right or down, you're going to cause screen flash as the system attempts to redraw the entire interface every time you change the window size. However, if you only anchor to the left and top, and I will show you that in a little bigger view of the auto-sizing box, just anchoring left and top, you'll never get screen redraw and therefore no flash if you were to change the size of the window in the middle of the session. So, those two objects, bottom and right, don't use them. Let's talk about object real estate planning. So, in FileMaker WebDirect, there's no click-through. Remember, you're in a browser with a single window to work with, and you're working with browser restrictions. So if I had this nice field called Sergeant at Arms, and I've assigned George Patton to be my Sergeant of Arms, and then I placed a checkbox behind the field, I'm never going to be able to actually click that checkbox, because the field, if it were superimposed over the checkbox, because it's transparent and you think you can see the checkbox, the mouse can't see it, neither can the keyboard, so you'll never be able to click it. So in this case, I might move the checkbox away from the field off to the right. Here's what's interesting. If I take just that checkbox and I place it on the screen somewhere, and that's assigned to a button And the button basically says, set the field tool 1 so that the checkbox will appear. And the checkbox has hide object attached to it. So it's hide the object when the value in the background doesn't equal 1. And in this case, it equals 0. So when I click this box, then the checkbox appears. If I were to click the checkbox again, I would toggle it back to 0, and the checkbox would disappear. The point being here is you've got two objects, each with a button, and I actually can check either one of them, whichever one's in front. So I put the check in front, obviously, and when I click the check and deselect it, and it disappears, then I go back to seeing the other object beneath it. So long as objects are hidden, you do have click-through. But when they're visible, you don't have click-through. So just picture it. If you have objects you can see, you can't stack them in order to be able to reach them and execute some event, whether it's entering the field or exiting a script. But if they are invisible, they can be stacked. So you need to consider object click-through and shared versus dedicated real estate. Shared meaning when things are superimposed over each other. Dedicated is when they sit separately on the interface. And object location, especially if they're shared. Now, if you're in find mode, you may make certain things disappear that would normally appear in browse mode, and the other way around. In find mode, you might have a big banner that appears says, hey, you're in find mode, but a lot of other objects might disappear. So your real estate is cleared depending on object visibility. So you also have to consider the stacking order and the actual positioning of objects. Let's talk a little about portal rows. I like to apply an on-object script trigger to a portal object. So if I have this nice portal that has several buttons applied to it and a nice field in the middle with maybe a background highlight, at the very bottom corner right, you'll notice the orange badge, which indicates there's a script trigger associated with this portal. What that does is whenever I click into a row in the portal, the very first thing that's going to trigger, if there's multiple script triggers or buttons, is that script trigger associated with the bottom right corner of the portal row, which means I can use that to capture the ID of the row before I do anything else. And then I immediately can refresh a nice colored background on the row to let everybody know that I've got that row highlighted, and then I can do other things, whether it's delete the row or edit the field or highlight the field by selecting it. This is a real nice trick that works in FileMaker, but it works really well in WebDirect, and the reason I want to bring it up is because you can use this same feature in a list view, not just in a portal, so that when you click into a field, you can immediately take some action in the field in the list view or the portal, or in a list view, if you're in find mode and you click into the row, then you can immediately say, oh, on find mode, don't execute whatever other script you might have by highlighting the row, which may normally perhaps trigger navigation to a detail view when you click that row. Instead, it could say, oh, I'm in find mode, just go into the field and allow someone to type a value so they can perform a find. This is a nice trick to know for FileMaker in general, but it really is useful in WebDirect. So that also includes a little discussion about find mode, but you might want to consider hiding certain objects in find mode and displaying certain objects in find mode, perhaps like a banner that declares I'm in find mode, so users know that they are and they don't try to do data entry. You can do redirect with FileMaker WebDirect using a little bit of PHP and HTML and session variables. Now all you really need are 3 PHP files that I'll give you. And if you put them in the right place, you can redirect into FileMaker and out of FileMaker. So when people end their session or time out in WebDirect, you can dynamically determine where to send them so they don't have to go back to the FileMaker WebDirect main menu, which a lot of times is not a very pleasant experience. Instead, you can send them wherever you want. To do that, you have to enable PHP on your server and apply these very simple 3 files that I can make available to you. They're just called in.php, out.php, and session.php. And where they're placed is going to be in this path on the HTTP server folder, and inside of that the conf folder, C-O-N-F, inside the FileMaker server folder. So what should you take home from this session, I'd say take home from the FileMaker WebDirect is an incredible tool. You can do a lot with it. It's really fun. It's easy to learn. It's fast to deploy. There's not a lot that you need to really know specifically. I just like to give you some guidelines for a good experience. Almost anything you can do in FileMaker Pro will render well. It allows you to extend FileMaker Pro into the web browser world for any type of device on any platform. You don't need to know anything about web design, and the performance is even better than FileMaker. It's just phenomenal. What do you need to know to do this? Well, you need to know a little about FileMaker Pro, some of the basic concepts with the tools and different elements, objects, field definitions, scripting. You need to know a little about FileMaker Server, how to deploy it, how to configure maybe the PHP files if you want to do dynamic redirect. It would be helpful to know a little perform script on server, and certainly things like layouts and security and hide objects and conditional formatting and normal things like that. But just about any skill level that you are at with FileMaker Pro now, you can deploy FileMaker WebDirect, enhance your experience, and extend the reach of the work you do. It's just an incredibly phenomenal tool, and I love it. Good to know a little about layout, design, themes, and styles, of course. Anything you might know about relationship diagramming ahead of time so you can plan your work is always smart to know. And if you know a little bit about plugins on the server side, so much the better. I'll end with this quote. If we can really understand the problem, the answer will come out of it, because the answer is not separate from the problem. The answer to extending FileMaker is FileMaker WebDirect. And it's not the solution is not separate from the problem, because FileMaker WebDirect is part of FileMaker. It's all one platform of tools and knowledge and capability. I wish you well. Have fun with this tool. Reach out to me if you need some help. And thank you very much for watching. This is a live demo presentation for Claris Engage 2020 featuring FileMaker Claris WebDirect. I built a nice system for a public speaking organization that I'm quite active in. We started with a color theme. Obviously we used green and gray and a few other shades. So first we came up with a color theme, then we built a theme, and we added styles to the theme and saved everything. The top navigation bar is something my customers are very comfortable with. It's a traditional approach, horizontal button bar, and you can see how it rolls to opposite colors as you go across. We then built a tab panel with reverse colors. Instead of white on green, we've got green on white or gray, depending on what you're looking at. There's various tabs for various procedures that can happen at an event. So this system is to track notes and attendance and awards at different events. We've got on-object modify and on-object enter script triggers tied to the portals and different things. We're using card windows. We're also using on-timer script steps. This allows us to have a really beautiful interface, and with the use of card windows, we can have a single point of context and edit, add, delete, associate, all kinds of things without ever actually navigating anywhere else, because the card window gives us the second level of context. So everything can happen from the meeting. What you're looking at is FileMaker here. Now if I minimize that and log back in to my Toasters Club, so we got a piece of toast on the logout just to kind of be silly with it, and then I get a login, I come back in, and what you're seeing here is the same interface as FileMaker, and with good planning, it looks identical. This is WebDirect, this is FileMaker. I'll toggle it a few times. WebDirect, FileMaker. WebDirect, FileMaker. Back to WebDirect. So a lot of the functionality is the same. If I want to have somebody attend a meeting who's not there already, I'll now look for Charity Barger, C-H-A-R-I. And all I have to do is type something unique about the person's name, and my onObject timer will pick that person and associate them. So I don't even have to click enter or click out of the field or anything. All I have to do is type something unique about their name. Let's try somebody else. Go down the list, and I've got Paige Bussell. Probably only one page. And now she's coming to the meeting. Let's add somebody to the meeting. I know. Let's add Brad Freitag. I'd love to get him to one of our meetings. The system automatically will parse his name when pasting the whole thing. You can go through all the different fields. And then I'm going to say, well, Brad's probably the president because he's the president of Claris. If I add him, it'll add him to the system and also associate him as a logged in person. If I now come back to FileMaker, you can see that all those records that I added are also showing in the list here. So it's instantly refreshing the data. It's not highlighting in yellow Brad's name in FileMaker because it's a different session that's running. I could show you all kinds of fancy features here, but you can see that we have superimposed. So there is not click-through, but because I'm hiding the checkbox, when I click it again, I bring it back. So I can have objects sharing real estate, but only when that's intelligently planned. Let's try logging out of the system. I'm going to have a warning to ask me if I want to. I can always say cancel. But if I log out, then it's just going to take me back to my toast icon. That could easily have redirected me to any website I want, and that can be dynamically controlled through procedures and values that you set up based on what view you're at. I've built a lot of systems where redirect can go wherever I want, and if you're on a different page, it'll exit to a different page. Now if I just click on this piece of toast, it's going to ask me to log back in, which is really cool because it's using built-in security. When you redirect somewhere else and you come back, FileMaker is going to check your credentials and you're going to have to actually submit them again. It's not just going to allow you to go back and forth all over the place. So that's a real nice, simple demonstration of a live WebDirect system that I'm actually using. I'm still adding features to it. Most everything's going to happen on this one screen, but the other tabs, when it's complete, will give me the opportunity to look at lists of different things and select things there, but I can do all the editing from this one screen. What I want to show you briefly is my Windows server. Now I'm giving this video demonstration on Windows because I also have my AWS server that's hosting this on Windows. The redirect in and out is based on 3 simple PHP files: in.php, out.php, and session.php. And you can see that they're very simple files that have some simple code associated with them. All 3. And there's the in, there's the out, there's not much to it. And I'm happy to give these to you if you contact me. And then there is the session PHP. Then I have a simple file which is a picture of toast. And then I have simple index and redirect HTML files that I made that are very simple that just allow me to go in a circle for the purposes of presentation, but it could easily be sent to a different website. As long as you don't mismatch the protocols, as I presented earlier in the design consideration session. So there's a little bit of a live demo for you to consider. I will come back to the WebDirect session and show you. You can do very clean interfaces that function very robustly, and they can look identical to your FileMaker Pro, which is what I'm looking at here. I want to thank you for taking time and visiting us today. Reach out to me if you have any questions. I'm always glad to help. Thank you very much.